Welcome to Everyday Greatness, and thank you for watching. I'm your host, Barnaby Howarth. This is a show designed to help people realise there is greatness in being an everyday Harry Sacker Rolls. We're live today at my old high school, the Hills Grammar School, and I want to dedicate this episode to my old school principal, Robert Phipps. Mr. Phipps is no longer with us, but he created an environment here at Hills Grammar that meant my schooling days were among the best of my entire life. So I want to say thank you to Mr. Phipps, and hello to everybody at Hills Grammar and to the Phipps family. Greatness. It's something most of us have had dreams about one day achieving. But if we don't achieve it, have we done something wrong? Have we failed? The pressure on kids these days to be great is crushing, or more specifically, the pressure to cope if they don't end up being great. We live in an incredible world these days where opportunities are seemingly endless. So kids should quite rightly feel like they could do anything they put their minds to and be the best at it. But how people cope with not being great is one of the biggest challenges facing kids today. I'm going to talk to two school students today and two parents of school students to find out if just being a real human being and living an everyday life is enough to be proud of the person you are. But before I get up on my soapbox, I should introduce myself properly. When I was in year 9 of this very high school, I was diagnosed with diabetes. The year after I graduated from this very high school, I played a season in the AFL for the Sydney Swans. I was delisted by the Swans after 1 year, so I moved down to Melbourne to have one last crack at making the AFL. I did a pre-season at the Melbourne Demons under Neil Danaher and played 2 seasons in the Victorian Football League, Sandringham. When I moved back to at the end of the 2 years, I hadn't attracted any interest from any AFL clubs. So I moved back to Sydney and resumed my playing career with the Pennant Hills Demons. When I was on 96 games for Pennant Hills, I was bashed in an alcohol-fueled gang attack and had a stroke. My parents were told they might have to give some consideration to turning off my life support. But when I regained consciousness and got a handle on my situation, I worked really hard on my rehabilitation and ended up making an AFL comeback for Pennant Hills and played my 100th game. Then I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with my little sister and a mate, and I walked the Kokoda track with my brother, my sister-in-law and another mate. Then in 2013, I met the girl of my dreams. But in 2014, she was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. We were married shortly after, and we shared a love that was so intense I wouldn't have believed it was true if I hadn't lived it myself. In 2016, I lost the girl of my dreams, my wife Angela, to breast cancer. I'm only telling you guys all this stuff because I think it gives me a leg to stand on when I'm talking about things that don't pan out the way you are hoping. I want to start today by talking to two people who I consider to be great. I think just getting through one day of school these days is an achievement. But getting through one day of school with a smile on your face, with humility, humbleness and happiness is a real feather in your cap. And both Chelsea McVeigh and Flynn Hume have exactly that. So welcome guys. Thank you for joining us. Now we're going to go ladies first and start with you, Chelsea. But before I start, I believe you have something you want to say.
We hope the party rocked on.
Happy birthday, Ben. So, Chelsea, you're a fairly talented girl, I hear. You're the lead role in the school musical production. What's the role and what's the production?
So we're doing the Addams Family this year in June, and I'm playing the role of Morticia, which is really exciting. I'm really getting into that role, and it's everything I love doing: dancing, singing, acting.
What do you want to be when you finish school?
I think I'm thinking of going into psychology, but I also love languages, so I'd love to continue my French.
School can be a very stressful place. Is there anything for you that triggers stress and anxiety and worry?
Probably for me, I know for a lot of people it's definitely exams. For me, I usually put things in perspective, so school is not something that I worry about a lot. I just believe in taking up every opportunity and having a balanced school life.
And do you see stress and anxiety amongst your peers here at Hills Grammar?
I do, especially during exam periods. I think everyone's kind of competing with each other and constantly comparing themselves to each other, so it is quite stressful there.
So what advice would you give if a friend of yours came up to you at school, stressed and anxious and worried? What advice would you give them?
I'd probably tell them, to be honest, that it's just an exam, and because I think a lot of people these days think that, you know, the ATAR is the one thing that they need to get into all their courses, but what they don't realise is that there's actually a lot more pathways to achieve that, and it's not all about success, but the work you've put in to achieving that.
So where does all this stress come from? I imagine social media plays a fairly big role in adding to anxiety in kids.
Yeah, I think social media, I mean, at the moment we've got something called an HSC discussion group. So people kind of post their feelings about the HSC, and I think that puts pressure on kids to always be studying and get the best results they can. For other people it might be factors like parents or the school environment, even just being amongst other kids that are stressed at times.
And how does you're a student at Hills Grammar.
Yeah.
How does your school help to alleviate that stress from you guys?
Well, we've got a lot of good programs. For example, every Wednesday we have a grade meeting. And so we kind of learn to combat stress by watching videos on pressure and also how to maintain our well-being, so good exercise and sleep and nutrition, so to avoid that stress.
So, sorry, give me 1 second. There's so much information out there these days on social media and Facebook and on live streaming shows where people give you guys advice on how to handle pressure. Do you feel that adds to the pressure?
I don't think so, not for me personally. I kind of like to heed that advice and just keep thinking that the HSC is not really the be-all and end-all, because I know that it has changed from the past, and now it seems there's more pressure put on kids with the introduction of the ATAR and everything as the only way to get into university, but I think there are more important things in life.
So if you personally have had a stressful day at school before an exam or something, how do you alleviate it?
Well, normally if I'm at home, I just try and do something I love. So for me, that's playing music or exercising, speaking to people to kind of get the stress out.
Do you and your mates talk about stress and anxiety and pressure as much as adults talk about it?
I think it actually helps us a little bit because we can kind of give each other advice, and you know, we realise that we're all in the same boat, so it's not just a personal stress. Yeah.
Right. So who's giving you the best tips on how to handle stress? From your parents to celebrities, is there someone out there that you always go to try and find answers to how to live a less stressful life?
I think probably my parents. I think they're really supportive of me and always encouraging to not only worry about school but also have a good well-being, to take up every opportunity, and just enjoy the final year of school.
Yep. So I just want to talk about the HSC discussion group on Facebook.
Yeah.
Your brother apparently used to read comments on there for a bit of a laugh.
Yeah.
Are there any comments at the moment that are funny or?
There are a couple. There's a lot of memes being posted at the moment, which kind of they help to alleviate the stress because we're all laughing about having a big assignment due the next day, and we can kind of have a joke. But there are other things that are stressful. A lot of people post on there, you know, I got 99.95, here's how to do it. So I think that we're all always wanting to achieve that mark.
So if you knew someone was bullying someone else on social media, trolling, what would you say to that person? Would you confront them and tell them to pull their head in?
I think I would, yeah. I think bullying in general is a horrible thing, but particularly cyberbullying, there's no need for it, and I think usually it's that person's own insecurity that's making them do that.
Have you ever experienced bullying yourself?
No, not personally.
All right. So when you say your parents are the biggest alleviators of stress for you, what particular things do they do if you come home stressed and worried? What do they do for you?
I think they just give good advice, really. They just tell me that, it's only an exam. It's not all about the HSC. There are, as I said before, more important things in life. And just, I think, talking about it makes you feel better sometimes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So bear with me.
That's okay.
Just talk amongst yourselves for a second.
Yeah, and even I'll, go for a walk with mum and dad if I'm feeling stressed, or take the dog out, or, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. So in the general world, there's a lot of stressful things and things that add pressure to a general person's life. Do you take much interest in the news and current affairs and what's happening in the world in general?
Yeah, I do. In particular, I'm interested in learning about crime, so I look at that side of things in the news. But yeah, I think a lot of my HSC subjects this year have called for being up with the news all the time, like my legal studies and different things like that. So yeah, I need to be.
And who, I know you said your parents alleviate stress, but who's the one person in the media and the outside world that you think is someone that's setting a good example? And not to get too carried away with stress.
That's a good question. Yeah, I can't think of one at the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jasmine Bay, it's been a pleasure chatting to you.
Thanks, Barnaby.
And I really hope you go well in your HSC and don't stress out too much about it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now we're going to swap the hot seat. I'll call Flynn for you over.
Yeah.
Thank you. And go and join your mother.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks, Chelsea. Flynn Hume, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Flynn, you're a Year 12 student.
That's right, yes I am.
And your father, before I start, I believe you have something you want to say.
That's right, I do. I just want to say thank you to Marcel from Jefferson Grove for letting us use your music today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marcel. So your dad is an AFL footballer.
Sure is, yeah.
Have you ever seen him play?
I have. He's been playing AFL pretty much all my life, so we spend lots of Sundays going out to watch him play. It's been really cool watching him play. He's kind of getting a bit old for it now. Once he's above 40, it's kind of surprising to still make the team. But the fact that he's actually still in it is really cool. So I love watching him play now.
Is he any good?
Once if you get past 35, it's kind of going to be a doubt, no matter how much time. But I think he's awesome, regardless of how skilled he is. He always talks about how many goals anyway.
Right. So what do you want to do when you finish school?
I've been looking at heaps of stuff. I'm always looking at courses or kind of things that I could try out after school. I was looking into a psychology course, but I haven't really set my mind on anything that I'm kind of like, that's definitely what I do, that's what I'm aiming towards. So right now I'm just trying to do the best I can right now, and then kind of see where that takes me.
Outstanding. What is let me get deep on you for a second, what's your definition of success today?
Well, it's very interesting you say that, because it's kind of changing all the time. Because I think if you asked me at the start of Year 12, we'd hear a lot about achieving the goals that you want and making really well and getting all the really good marks that you want. But my experience during Year 12 is that you'll never actually be satisfied with yourself if you are always comparing yourself to other people and you're always basing how well you're doing on the marks that you're getting. So now my goal, and I think I'm successful the most when I come out of exams, I come out of tests, so I end the week knowing that was the best that I could do. I gave my best effort. And living a balanced life as well. Making sure that I'm still hanging out with friends, I'm still exercising, I'm still keeping up with my hobbies like I play guitar and drums, and being able to kind of do all those sort of things together, that's when I'm at my best. And so I think that is actually kind of what I see success as being now.
So you recently did an assignment on the modern definition of success and how that's changed pre- and post-industrial revolution. What was success? What did success look like to you before that assignment?
It was just a lot about achieving these really high things and standing out as someone who was so successful. It was like status was so high, or earning so much money, or all those sort of things that you see, wow, that person is successful because they've done that. But you can't realise that if you're in that mindset, you're never going to feel satisfied with yourself no matter how hard you try, because you're always looking for the next thing. You're always comparing yourself to other people. So I realised that the most satisfied people are actually the ones that can take a step back and look at all the stuff they've done and go, and actually, I gave my best, and there was nothing I actually could have done to change what happened. So there's no way I could be, dissatisfied with that. So I think that's what I'm kind of the mindset that I'm trying to adapt, and so that's kind of how I want to see the world now. As just giving everything your best shot, regardless of where you get, because at the end of the day, that's what you give, then how could you be unhappy with what you've done?
How old are you?
I'm just turned 18.
That's a ridiculously mature answer for an 18-year-old.
Well, yeah, it took a lot of research and a lot of kind of development to get me there, and it was only very recently too, and lots of help from an interview that I did with you, and like talking to my grandparents about their experiences, and but I guess it's really hard to think about that in the position that lots of kids my age are, because a lot of their life is defined by how well they're doing in school, or how well they're doing in sport, and that's how most people see them, as a rank or a position or a sort of status. So, and it's hard, like, I couldn't say I think like that all the time. I often compare myself to others and want to be the best rank and all that sort of thing. But I just know in my heart that that is kind of the best way to go for me, is to be proud of myself just because I can put in my best effort.
So, tell me about your grandparents' experiences. You said you learned a lot from them.
Yeah, so I was talking to like all my grandparents about their experiences as kids compared to mine now, and they had like very little compared to what I've got. You know, the technology was limited. There's no social media, anything like that. But all of them talk about their childhood, like they were really, really satisfied with it. They had really good childhood memories. They were really fond of looking back on stuff that they'd done. And it just made me realise, like, the way society is progressing, we're not making it easier to be happy with ourselves. Like, all the technology that we're given and all that sort of stuff isn't helping us be happier. It's just giving us kind of more things to think about and more things to concentrate on. And there's so much more pressure now on earning lots of money and ranking really well, and they never experienced that. They come from families where the parents were just doing their best to get the child by, and they could be completely fine with that. But I guess we kind of developed, and my mindset is clearly a lot different to theirs was, because me and a lot of other kids my age are focused on getting, the best rank and the most money and the best university and all that sort of thing. It's quite eye-opening.
So I had my 20-year high school union last year, so I've been out of the game for a while.
Yeah.
Tell me about the pressure at school. If you go into an exam thinking you'll blitz it, but then you get your results a week later and you only got 50%, how do you feel about yourself?
Well, it's not even if you get a bad mark. You can get a perfectly fine mark, but if your friends or other people are getting better marks than you, then it just lets you down kind of no matter what. It's a very bad mindset to be in, I know, but it's very hard to kind of get yourself out of that way of seeing things, because you're constantly comparing yourself to other people. I mean, that's what the ATAR is. Let's rank everyone based on how good their exams are. And so I just got some results back this week, and I should be very happy with all of them, but like, I'm friends with some really smart people, and then when they get stuff back that's better than me, like, I can't help but going, I could have done a bit more, this person's done better than me, that sucks. But you've really got to put things into perspective, and when I tried this exam period was like, I walked out of every exam going, that's actually the best I could have done in that, and remembering that, so that when I got my exams back, like, doesn't matter what it says, I've done my best and that was the best I could do. And I ended up getting really good results anyway. So really trying to not focus on comparing myself to other people and what other people are doing, just focus on just doing the best I can.
Excellent. And does that pressure, does that extend to your social life? Like, if you ask a girl out who you're keen on, and she says no, do you sit back and think, what have I done wrong? What's wrong with me?
Yeah, to an extent. I think it's very different for a lot of other people. I think standards are very different. Like, like my standards for my schooling are very high. My standards for my romantic life, maybe not so much. So you kind of judge people on that. So I guess you kind of really pick and choose what you're going to judge yourself on and what you're going to relax with. So I think I've chosen to focus on my academics a lot, and so failure in that area like is really looked down upon. Failure in the romantic sense, that's just going to come. It's not really too big a fuss. So I guess it kind of, it's what I choose to put pressure on myself on, that's what I'm going to focus on.
Fair enough. Let me ask you a deep question. Can you have success without experiencing failure?
I don't think you can have the meaningful, fulfilling success. Because I think success without failure would be you've just basically been given, it was given to you, or, you know, everything you tried, you did first try, and there's no experience for learning or growth, or there's no opportunity there. I think the most fulfilling experiences are the ones where you can look back 6 months or a year ago and say, I was terrible at that, or I had no idea what was going on, now look at me now, look how far I've improved. Like I never would have started exercising if I had that mindset, or I never would have started playing guitar or drums if I had that mindset, and never would have studied if I had that mindset. But now I can look back on how far I've come and how much I've been able to develop. You know, that's awesome. But it comes with a lot of, I suck at this, but let's improve, you know? So I really think it's really important to fail, because that's the best way to grow and the best way to be fulfilled with what you've done.
So how do you aim for success while at the same time embracing failure? You have some goals and then you give it your best. Because then once you give it your best, then you know this is like nothing could have changed from this point. You know, if I tried not as hard, then it wouldn't have gone better, and I couldn't have tried any harder than what I've done. So really just focusing on the self and putting in your best effort and knowing that you tried, and keeping that balance and talking to others, and really just enjoying your life and putting your best foot forward. That's kind of the way to go. Yeah. Beautiful. Do you think your parents are successful people?
Yeah, of course. I mean, well, I guess it's how you define success, because they're not superstars or anything like that. But especially recently, they've helped me through heaps of stuff. And they work really hard at what they do, and they're really supportive of me, and so they're massively successful, especially as parents. I feel so lucky to have people like them who kind of coach me through stuff. Especially this year, I didn't realise kind of how much I could get from them, but they've been huge helps to me. And so in that sense, they're massively successful, and I hope that they feel that way, because they deserve to understand that they've really had an impact and really made my life different in the best way.
What are the best pearls of wisdom one or the other have given you?
I think they can take me out of it when I'm so focused on doing well, so focused on this is what I've got to improve in my life. They can just say, you know, you can just relax for a bit. Like your life is not defined by what happens when you're 17 or 18 years old, you know, but you never seem to realise that until someone can take you away from it and say, you're actually doing fine, just ease up on yourself. And so that's been massive for me to kind of take a step back, and they've given that to me. I'm really grateful.
Well, thank you. For an 18-year-old bloke, you're a very mature and insightful and intellectual guy.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. And now we're going to swing the hot seat around, get ready to obey Chelsea's mother.
Hi, Barnaby.
Sorry, just give me 1 second, I've got a spiel. When I catch up with my little sister and her husband these days, I see them doting over their little baby girl, and I always sit back and think they must be so proud to see their little girl growing up. So I can only imagine how Chelsea's parents and Flynn's parents have felt, sitting watching their children handle themselves with such humility, grace, intelligence and happiness. They're probably sitting back there proud as punch. So I want to talk to Chelsea's mother, Rena McVeigh, but before I start, if you have something you want to say, Bunny.
I do. I just wanted to thank Liz Pelinkoff for allowing us to film at this beautiful school today at Hills Grammar, and she's away having a wonderful holiday, so we hope you're having fun in Europe, Liz.
Thank you, Liz. Now, at school these days, kids are on iPads and laptops and their iPhones and all sorts of devices. What technology was available when you were at school?
We didn't really have any screens, really, apart from we didn't have a whiteboard, we had a blackboard. So, very basic things, but you know, it was enough because that's all we knew. And like Flynn was saying, I think technology is a wonderful thing. It can make our lives easier in many ways, but there is a lot for kids to concentrate on, and sometimes just even trying to keep up with everything that's going on in their social world, that can be a challenge, not to mention all the academic commitments and sporting and whatever else they have as well. So yeah, I didn't have much in the way of technology. I had a typewriter.
How'd that work out for you?
Yeah, I sort of bashed away on it a bit.
Nice.
Might have been good piano practice.
Very true. So when Chelsea's brother Matthew started school, did you sit down with your husband and develop a game plan for how you're going to handle his schooling, or is it a day-by-day approach as parents?
Well, we had a few criteria for choosing a school, if that's what you're getting at.
I just wanted to see what the parenting tactics are. Do you guys sit down and develop a game plan, or do you just take each day as it comes?
I think a lot of it comes from, I suppose, just, it's not like we had an agenda and said, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to raise this kid? Just from chatting to each other and communicating, I guess just over time we came up with a game plan. But from the start, our biggest concern was his well-being. So even when he was in kindergarten or whatever, when he first started coming to school, our whole aim was to ensure that he felt comfortable and happy here and had friends. So that was our focus for the initial interviews anyway.
So do you and your husband get nervous sending Chelsea off to school every day with the bullying and the trolling and the anxiety and the stress these days?
We don't. Luckily, we don't really feel anxious about that for her. I know there are a lot of pressures and there's a lot of potential for adversity, but she's lucky to be in this school environment where there's a lot of protection around that. So, as Chelsea mentioned, the weekly meetings with the teachers, and they have an excellent wellbeing program. So I feel that in the best way possible, she is a little bit protected from some of those pressures.
So as parents, when Chelsea comes home from school or Matthew came home from school after a stressful day, what was your tactic? What did you do to help calm them down?
I think the main thing that Chelsea needs is someone to listen to her ranting. And that seems to be enough for her. I think in the past we have tried saying, well, why don't you try this, try that, but she actually doesn't really want to hear that. What I've found is that she just wants someone to listen to her. And by the time she's finished saying it all, things become clearer, and then she works out what she wants to do as part of her game plan. So that's all she seemed to really need. Matthew was a unique child because he didn't really seem to experience stress. So he's just one of those really relaxed kind of people, so he didn't really complain about anything much at all.
Mm-hmm. So you're a doctor, you're a GP.
Yes.
Do you see kids coming into your practice asking for help on mental anxiety issues?
Yeah, all the time.
From school pressure?
Yeah, it's not necessarily just school pressure, but it's all the pressures that are on kids. It could be just feelings of depression, anxiety. It could be friendship issues. It could be, all sorts of things, really.
And how do you handle it as a doctor?
Well, basically by listening to what they have to say, trying to ensure that they've got some systems in place for keeping safe and secure, making sure they have some phone numbers or websites that they can reach out to. Often it comes to referring them to a psychologist to be able to talk about things in greater depth, and just giving them some advice about basic self-care, sleep, looking after their exercise, making sure they keep things in perspective and keep their social circle going, as well as their academics.
Yeah. And how do you feel about it as a mother of two children yourself?
Sometimes, sadly, I look at the situation that some kids are in and think myself very, very lucky that we don't have such a situation. But I know that, there's potential for all sorts of things to go wrong. So it's constantly watching for signs that kids are struggling and trying to be there as a support for them.
So I'll just talk about social media for a second. Does social media make it easier to parent because you've got so many different resources for advice? Or does it make it harder because there's so much to cut through to find the relevant stuff for you?
I guess in some ways the internet is a wonderful thing because there are some great websites around, like Headspace or Reach Out, and there's some wonderful resources available when it's from a reliable source. But I think sometimes things like Facebook or even your own group messages, that's not necessarily always helpful,
Yeah.
I find.
So is it making it harder to parent? The social media, different resources and opinions and...
I think it can be a challenge to sort of sift through some of that information and work out what's relevant and what's real and what you should be paying attention to. Yeah. So I don't know that it's necessarily making it harder, but I think knowing which resources to choose is important.
So you and your husband, who do you find, if Chelsea or Matthew needs someone outside of you to look up to, who do you find in the outside world is a good example of someone who's got their stuff together and is really well composed human being?
Well, I think Chelsea actually looks to some of her teachers for that. Not so much in the outside world, but in her immediate world. She has a lot of respect for a couple of teachers in particular, that she really looks to them and learns a lot from the advice that they give.
Which teachers in particular? Give me a rap.
She loves her English teachers in particular, Mr. O'Donoghue, he's the head of Year 12, and also Mr. Clendine, who's her English teacher. She gets a lot out of listening to them, so.
Lovely work. So do you find pressure at school these days, is it a lot different and more intense than it was when you were at school?
Yeah, it is. It's a bit more complex. We did have pressure in our school as well, also sort of geared towards the HSC, and I happened to be in a cohort that was pretty competitive, like Flynn. I had a lot of bright friends as well, so there was that competition, but it didn't feel worrying. I think it was a healthy competition and a friendly competition, so it wasn't really, I wouldn't say it was detrimental. And the HSC was a big focus back then, but I think over the ensuing years it became more and more of a focus. But now I think in the last probably few years I am noticing that the teachers are more concerned about descaling that to some degree and helping kids to work out that it's not the be-all and end-all, that there are other pathways to get where they want to go if they set their goals.
Yeah. So Chelsea seems like she's a fairly composed, level-headed kid, but if she was a stressed basket case, what advice would you give her?
I would say that it's really important to keep things in perspective and look at just being a well-rounded person, not just about academics. If she was stressed about that, I guess if she was stressed about even her piano exam, she did a piano exam recently, which was very, very important to her, and she was very worried about failing that. She passed it, but that too is something that you can learn from those experiences too. So I think I would just encourage her to look at it in a different way, to give it your best shot, enjoy the process, which she has always enjoyed practicing. Her piano teacher, Mrs. Belstead, is another person that she looks up to greatly and really enjoys lessons with her. And just to enjoy the process. Doesn't really matter what the result is. My kids had done so much art when they were little. It was just wonderful to see them enjoying that, even though the end product was maybe not worthy of keeping. So it's just about the process.
Yeah. So how do you feel these days when you see young kids in fairly high up social positions, like tennis players is probably the best example I'm thinking of, when you see them carry on like spoiled brats? How does that make you feel as a parent?
I don't think it really sets a very good example, because I think that they're putting too much pressure on themselves. I don't know where their pressure is coming from. It probably comes from within, and I don't think that's a very healthy way to be, because it probably leads to a sense of failure if they don't necessarily win that game or win that competition. I guess as a parent, I often say to Chelsea, but sometimes when you observe other people's behaviour, we can learn so much from that, because we can either try to emulate them, or we can say, I don't really like the way that person's behaving, and make a conscious decision not to be like that.
Yeah. So as parents, do you guys have discussions around the dinner table about pressure and role models and all that sort of stuff at night?
Yeah, maybe. I guess we do. It might not be necessarily so specific, but we might talk about our day and some things that we've encountered that, and through the discussion we sort of come to talking about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Renan McVeigh, you've created a very charming, happy and confident young child.
Thank you.
So congratulations and thank you for joining us on Everyday Greatness.
Thank you for having me.
Now we'll just do the hot seat shuffle.
Thank you.
Bring Michael Reid over.
Thanks.
Michael, welcome.
Thanks, bud.
Now I just need to stress, Michael is not Flynn's father. Michael is the father of two young schoolgirls who are both sitting here watching today. Now, before I start though, Michael, I believe you have something you want to say.
I do. I have to wish Kiara a happy birthday. Make sure you don't waste your time away thinking about yesterday's blues.
Happy birthday, Kiara.
Happy birthday.
So you are the executive producer at ABC News.
Editor now. Yeah.
Editor now.
Yeah.
Is that, I saw on two social media profiles you've listed yourself as an editor and a journalist.
Yeah.
No offence to editors or journalists, but is that selling yourself a bit short?
No, it's. I suppose it goes to the fact that social media is faster than the ABC in changing my title. So I'm like the newspaper editor of the news channel.
Fair enough. Now, your two kids who I can see at the back there, how old are they and what year are they in school?
Suki's 15 and Claudia's 11. So Suki's in year 10 and Claude's just about to finish year 6.
Right. You seem like a really proud dad. How does it make you feel seeing your two little girls walk out to school every day in their school uniforms? They seem like fairly confident, happy young kids.
Yeah, I mean it's
Pretty teary eyes.
it depends on the morning. Some mornings it does, other mornings it doesn't. I'm lucky enough to catch a bus with Suki in the morning, so as long as I'm not shouting at her to have breakfast or pull a skirt down, it's always a good morning. And I pick Claude up from school some days. So yeah, it is. It's interesting. 4 years ago, Sukes was going to school around the corner, and we didn't let her walk to school. And then a year later, she was going across town on 2 buses. So it's sort of your priorities change about what you think is safe, and letting them out, going out into the big bad world is always, you want to be protective, and then at some point you have to let go and let them become young, independent things.
Yeah. So do you also get worried at the same time when you see them go up to school about the stress and the pressure and the anxiety?
Yeah, I think you're always worried and making sure that you've prepared your kids as well as you can to go into the big bad world, and that they've got the tools they need to survive and thrive.
Now, you seem like a pretty smart guy. How do you reduce the risk of bullying on social media?
I don't think you can ever really reduce the risk of bullying on social media. I think you have to hope that you're aware of what's going on social media, so you have some oversight on what's going on the girls' accounts, and that they're not involved in that sort of thing, too often. And we've been lucky so far that there hasn't been any sort of cyberbullying.
Yeah.
So it's been, but it's obviously a big concern for a lot of parents, and it's a really difficult area to deal with because it's so hard to stop once it starts.
So your girls are at school at the moment. Is the pressure they face today more intense than the pressure you faced when you were at school when dinosaurs still roamed around?
It was that long ago. I think the pressure to succeed is still the same. I think the kids before were talking about the ATAR or the HSC as it was in our day, and I think the pressure to succeed in that is still there. But I think social media has added a new dimension to schooling that makes things so much harder than we ever had. You just can't escape that. We talk about a 24-hour news cycle at work. I think for kids nowadays, there's this 24-hour cycle that there's no downtime from your presence online, or your opinions are always being monitored, your activities are being monitored, what you say, what you do. I think, and bullying. So I think from that perspective, it's much harder for kids these days.
So one of the most serious consequences about this bullying nonsense is self-harm.
Yeah.
Where does this pressure come from? The kids think it's a good idea to hurt themselves.
Yeah, I don't know. I talked to Sukes about this on the way up here. And it's obviously a cry for help, but there's also, I think, an element of glorifying it on social media. But obviously it's a terrible trend, and we need to be doing more to try and work out why it's happening, because I can't understand a kid thinking that things have got so bad that they have to self-harm.
So let me give you the floor for a second. What can kids do to handle all this pressure?
I think they need support from their parents, obviously, and I think schools are getting much better at supporting kids and their well-being and monitoring that well-being. But it's a vexed question, because the pressure, some kids put too much pressure on themselves, and always have, and we talked about social media ramping up that pressure. You've got to find ways of dealing with that pressure, and I think that comes down to individuals and the way they deal with pressure. The kids here today talked about how they deal with it, how they deal with their stress, and I think it's working out individually how you do that, and then as a community. I don't think there's enough community support around it at the moment.
So you've been in the news yourself for decades.
A couple of decades, right?
Couple of decades.
Yeah, sure.
Who would you put up as an example of how to live a good, balanced life to your girls?
To be fair, it would probably be you. I mean,
I'm not fishing for compliments.
No, and either am I. I mean, the only reason is I think that I go into the newsroom, which is an obviously a very stressful environment, but every time I see you in the newsroom, you're always happy. And you have overcome amazing challenges, as we heard at the start. And I said to the girls, that's something you should always try and do. If you can overcome those sort of monumental challenges and still be positive, then you win.
Is that camera still got my head in there? So, give me 1 sec, I'm not that happy because I can't find my place. So your girls came home from school one day saying, Dad, I've just been bullied and Sally's really getting stuck into me. What advice do you give them?
I think you have to put it in perspective. I think you have to tell them that if someone is attacking you, and it depends on the level and the degree of it as well. But you have to realise that it's a small microcosm, and then everything gets amplified in the school environment, and you've got to be able to walk away. And sometimes you've just got to ignore it because it's really quite petty. Other times it's not, but when it is, and it's a tit for tat sort of thing, you've just got to walk away.
So I'll ask you the same question I asked Renu. You've been in the news for a long time, so you've seen brats and people carrying on and misbehaving.
Yeah.
What do you think as a father when you see stuff like that?
I mean, and you mentioned the tennis guys. It is embarrassing, and even the cricketers to a certain extent. To think that they'd go to that extent to cheat. You've got to walk away from that and say that's not how people should be operating. It shouldn't be a win at all costs or spitting the dummy. You've got to respect everyone and be respectful to yourself, and sort of carrying on like that is not respecting yourself or respecting the game or society.
So let me test your memory.
When
you were at school, did you have a game plan yourself? Did you sit down at the start of the year and say, I want to be X, Y, or Z, or did you just go, right, well, today I'm going to get through this?
It was a long
and
time
then
ago.
work out the rest tomorrow.
It was a long time ago. I don't think I ever had a game plan where I thought I'm going to achieve this, this, and this. And I was a fairly relaxed student. I mean, everyone talks about having smart friends. I had smart friends, and I knew that I wasn't going to be that smart. And I did get caught up in that, the HSC was the be-all and end-all, and if I didn't succeed, then it was all going to be terrible, and I wouldn't get into the uni that I wanted to, and I wouldn't do the course that I wanted to. But it's not about that. There are so many other avenues of doing things, and there was, even when I was going through it, that it's not all-consuming, and you need to have a perspective on that and realise that there are other options for you.
How did you deal with things, so when you were going through school, if you didn't get the marks you wanted, if you didn't get accepted for uni, if you didn't get the job you wanted, how did you deal with that disappointment?
Crying. Dealing with disappointments always is part of learning. I think, and you talked about it before, it's how do you enjoy success when you haven't had failure? And I think you have to learn from failure. And I think failure is an important part of society that I think, we talk about the nanny state and how we don't let kids fail anymore and no one loses a race, everyone gets a participation medal. Well, I think that's a problem. I think you do need to have disappointment in your life. You do need to know that you can make a mistake and come back from it, or you can learn from that. and grow and become better at it.
So how do we do it? How do we explain to kids that failure is good for you, while also not making them feel like they should accept second best?
Yeah, it's a difficult balancing act. And I don't think second best and failure are the same things. I think, you know, if you give it your all and you don't succeed, then you've got to work out what else you can do. But I don't think it's, as I said, I don't think it's one and the same thing. And failure is not succeeding when you've tried very hard. Well, then you've got to try a different way.
So in our generation, we grew up on the Michael Jordans and the really intense competitive sports people that were always aiming to be the best. Do you think that has affected our generation in how we bring up children and try not to make them feel like they have to be the best, and that's why there's so many participation medals? And
no, I don't. I mean, you look at LeBron James and he's going to be as good as Michael Jordan, and I think he's probably tried to be as successful as possible. I don't think role models have changed. I think the success is still based on winning, but not winning at all costs. And I think that's probably what's changed a bit. You know, we don't have that culture where you must crush your opposition. I think that's a bit better now.
Yeah. So how do you sit at the dinner table and explain to your girls in finite detail that sort of acceptance of not being the best?
I don't think we do it in finite detail. I don't think we have an agenda at dinner where we sit down and say, you know, you must do this and this to succeed, or this is what we consider success and this is what we consider failure. But it's those sort of general conversations you have around expectations and realisations of what things are about and how you are meant to behave in society and how you interact in society.
Yeah. Michael Reid, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Anytime.
On Everyday Greatness.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Now, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or whatever, but I feel like I know a little bit about resilience. So I want to call Chelsea and Flynn back and give them some advice based on my life experience and what I've learned in life. But while they're getting set up, I just want to issue a disclaimer. This advice is based purely on what got me through life and what I've learned and how I got through school. So anybody that decides to take this advice, please do so with a grain of salt. It's not a guarantee of success, it's just what had worked for me. So, Chelsea, Flynn, welcome back.
Thank you.
So I just want to give you a couple of snapshots of advice from what I've learned. The first piece of advice is to back yourself. There's so many people giving you advice on how you should live your life to be successful and what you should do, which is ironic given we're on a show where I'm giving you advice. But you guys are the only experts in your own life. So there's so much noise and distraction and hype, you need to cut through it. If you find yourself on a path that's making you happy and making you confident and think you're doing the right thing, stick to that path and don't let anybody knock you off it. That's probably a lot easier said than done, but something that helped me get through that was a book my friend put me onto when I was younger called The Inner Game of Tennis. The inner game of tennis is a metaphor for life, and in it the author says every tennis player has a self one and a self two. Self one is that annoying voice in the back of your head that deals in the hype and the emotion and the measurement and the calculating and the pressure, and notices your friend in the crowd and asks why the hell she's wearing that dress. But self two is that quiet voice of instruction that knows you've done the work, you've done the study before an exam. So the best tennis players are the ones that can quieten self one and let self two do most of the driving. So that might help work for you guys. The third piece of advice, and I hope I don't sound like a grumpy old man saying this, is to talk to people in person. I know technology is the way the world's going, but technology isn't a replacement for in-person communication. As a general rule of thumb, the more nervous you are about having a conversation with someone because you're not sure about what the result's going to be, you might make them angry or disappointed or upset. That makes that conversation more important to have in person. So when you guys get into the workforce, sending a text message to your boss and saying you're not going to make it to work is not going to cut the mustard. So please just talk to people in person, summon up whatever courage you need, get on the phone at least, face-to-face ideally, but on the phone if there's no other option. And the last piece of advice is to have fun. There's so much noise and hype and distraction that it must be really, really unnerving for you guys. I don't even know if you guys know who you want to be in 5 years' time, but all you can control right now is what you do for the rest of the day. So don't worry about the long-term stuff. Don't let it consume you and worry you and get you nervous and stressed. Just go through every day, one day at a time, and do the best you can and trust that things will fall into place around you. So I want to thank you guys so much for coming on today on Everyday Greatness. Thank you, Renu and Michael, for coming on as well. Now, I just want to say I hope you guys can tune in. I'm sorry, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I hope you can tune in again on the first Saturday of next month. We're back to our regular time of 10 a.m. If you have any comments or suggestions, please get in touch on everydaygreatness44@gmail.com. And I want to thank everybody that helped put this episode together. To all my guests, thank you again.
Thank you.
To Liz Pelinkoff from the Hills Grammar School, thank you for organising our shoot today. Thank you to our major sponsors, ARA Group, and thank you to the crew at Look Studio who are doing all the filming. And I hope if you can tune in next month, that'd be tremendous. But in the meantime, I hope you walk down the street proud of being an everyday Joe Bag of Donuts. Thank you.
Every day, we get things off the ground, keeping you connected and secure. We keep things running smoothly and know the importance of giving back. We're always looking at the bigger picture. We are ARA, reliable solutions for facilities and infrastructure.
I'm gonna drive this panel van to the end of the road and just leave it in the sun. I'm gonna climb that barbed wire. You can tell them all I'm not blaming anyone. Or you can tell them I'm on my way. You can keep my cell phone. I've got no intention of calling anyone. These shoes are good ones. Everything else can be figured out alone. Hold out some hope for me. Hold out some hope for you, and I hope you do. The first 25 miles have made a hole in my anesthesia. As the cold air wakes you, like the 100 times you nearly gave it up. Hold out some hope for me. Hold out a little hope for you. 'Cause only the bravest soul breaks away and rips away from the hardened people who might say, one less unbeliever, one more or less dreamer, don't matter anyway. This sad hysteria, knowing I might die without a sound. Send a joyful telegram, tell my friends stop blundering around. Brace yourself for some loneliness. Turn a corner to that deep recess you never meant to see. Hold out some hope for me. Hold out a little hope for you, and I hope you brace yourself for some loneliness. Light up the corners that you missed, 'cause only the bravest soul breaks away and rips away from the hardened people who might say, one less unbeliever, one more or less restless dreamer. You gotta wonder why he went so far to get away.